All right. Hello and welcome to this exciting interview with Blake Bowman from Gorilla Zen Fitness. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
All right. Awesome. I was checking out your YouTube channel a few years ago, and I was very impressed with the content that you were making. So I reached out. Obviously, I think we have similar backgrounds in terms of getting our training from NASM and stuff like that. And I know you're also into a lot of other stuff other than just talking about posture and back pain. Blake talks a lot about all body parts and biohacking stuff and just a lot of other health and wellness topics that you might be interested in. So yeah, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, man. Very happy to be here. I enjoyed our previous conversations that were not recorded. So really looking forward to this.
Yeah. And yeah, why don't you, instead of me talking, introducing you, I think let's have you also introduce yourself to our audience. Just tell them a little bit more about yourself and your company.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess, it all kind of starts with the backstory, which is I always grew up in I grew up in a health conscious household. My mom would always give my sister and I supplements and things like that, sneak it into our applesauce, and it tasted horrible. So I always kind of came from a health background, was an athlete my entire life, very involved in athletics, mostly like combat sports, martial arts, and wrestling and stuff like that. And once I graduated high school, I just started lifting weights primarily. And I got really big and strong, but I created through the process of, training improperly and sitting a lot in class, a lot of different muscle imbalances and postural misalignments, mobility issues. My biomechanics were really messed up. And I was really strong with this horrible foundation. And long story short, I damaged my body in myriad different ways. I had one time when I was like 19, I had bilateral patellar tendonitis, bilateral shoulder impingement, SI joint pain. I was just like in pain everywhere. I was like, had all this muscle, but I was in pain all the time and I couldn't do functional movements like play basketball, go hiking without pain. All I could do were these really rigid, compound lifts in the gym, deadlifts and things like that. And even those started to bother me. And I ended up getting shoulder surgery, visited a variety of different doctors and different therapists, and nobody really helped me, to the degree that I needed help. And I decided to take matters into my own hands, started studying corrective exercise and a bunch of other different modalities to basically fix my body. And that's what I was able to do. I started a YouTube channel in 2014, and I've been teaching other people how to do that to their own bodies ever since then. So that's what my coaching program is. That's what my company is all centered around. My company is Gorilla Zen Fitness. And that's what we teach people how to do is we teach them how to fix their own bodies.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. And why don't we just dive right in? You kind of touched on doing some corrective exercises. Can you just tell our audience what corrective exercises are?
Yeah. So like the title implies, they're exercises that are corrective, specifically with the focus of restoring joint mobility, flexibility, muscular balance, and musculoskeletal alignment, right? So posture. Really, corrective exercise is centered around addressing those things and optimizing those things.
Yeah, and so let's talk real quick about posture. Why do you think people are suffering with such bad postures these days?
Well, that's a good question. Some of that is obvious. I mean, we're doing activities and things with our bodies now that our ancestors never did, and our bodies, frankly, weren't designed for. Excessive sitting is one of those things, right? Most people know this nowadays somewhat, but they might not understand how damaging that really is. But sitting, living an overall sedentary lifestyle, and the training methods that people use when they're actually exercising, those two oftentimes compound and make muscle imbalances and posture worse. So most people know about the sitting, right? And how that is bad. but they're not aware of exactly how their weight training, strength training in the gym is contributing to their postural issues and making everything worse on top of the damage caused by sitting. So I think it's kind of a combination of sedentary lifestyle, excessive sitting, and improper training methodologies that are really at the root cause of this. And, there's a lot of other things too, like stress. I think you and I talked about that a little bit. If you're in a chronic state of stress, fight or flight mode, then the other half of the autonomic nervous system, the feed or breed branch of the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic, that can't turn on. And all of your basically ability to regenerate your cells and heal is going to get shut down, right? So that's another big thing that people are really dealing with, that is, adding to their dysfunction and the way that their body feels. A lot of people are super stressed out. They're stuck in fight or flight mode all the time, and they're never really truly able to relax. And that has a very big negative impact on how their body is able to deal with injuries, for example.
Yeah, all good stuff there. And I'm sure we'll get to all of those. Let's touch a little bit on what you said. So a lot of people work out in a way that can impact their posture or cause certain muscle imbalances, misalignments, and all that kind of stuff. Let's do some examples, like just maybe if you can think of an exercise or something that people do or your clients have done in the past. I don't know, they're doing a push-up or a row. What is a common fault in those exercises that might be causing them to worsen their posture?
Good question. So the exercise themselves, regardless of the way they're executing the exercise, can be distorting their posture. Let's use that example of push-ups. All right. And talk more specifically about the shoulders. One of the most common muscle imbalances we see in the upper torso is going to be like overactive, short and tight pectoral muscles. The muscles of the chest, the pec major and the pec minor, which is a smaller pec muscle right underneath the pec major. I would probably say 90% of the population, these muscles are short and tight already. All right. Too short, too tight, a lot of tension in here. And the result of that is, when these muscles become tight, specifically the pec major, the shoulders are going to roll forwards and inwards towards one another. They're going to internally rotate. So you're going to stand with, gorilla arm posture is what we call it, right? Internal rotation and anterior rotation of the shoulder joint, if you want to be technical. Basically, when the pecs are tight, the shoulders will roll in and forwards together. And that is a pretty big issue with regards to the shoulder. That can contribute to shoulder impingement syndrome and a variety of other, shoulder injuries that can come later down the road. So we have to understand that most people are just dealing with this pec tightness all the time. And if those same people totally just ignore their chest muscles and they ignore the fact that what they really need to be doing in this area is releasing and stretching it to create more length, and then they go in the gym and they do a bunch of push-ups or bench press or chest flies, they're shortening and contracting these muscles that are already too short and contracted, and they are literally adding strength to their dysfunction and making their issues worse, right? Specifically, in this case, the shoulders and the shoulder health and the shoulder alignment. So, it's not so much so about how they are executing the exercise as much, their form during it, as much as it is the exercise selection themselves and how that influences their current alignment and their current, muscular balance. That's not to say, doing push-ups, bench press, and chest flies is bad. Those are good movements to contract the pectoral muscles, subsequently break them down and cause them to get stronger. But if you are going into those exercises already having tension in there, having too much tightness in there, then in that case, for you, those exercises are going to do, some damage. And this is just something that people don't really think about. Does that make sense? So
yeah, that makes sense. So I think what you said there, I think it's important for people to realize is that it's very important that an individual approach is taken, in the sense that if you're someone who is like this already,
Yes.
you probably need to focus on just thoracic mobility and releasing your pec muscles and all that. And if you can see me on video, I'm showing a really hunched posture. You probably don't need to do more push-ups. For someone who doesn't have those issues, they could do some chest exercise and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I do, and all that kind of stuff. But I think for those people who can do who can do those chest exercises, then what they need to do is still make sure they're doing some corrective exercises, some still postural exercises, and also building out the opposite muscles in the back as well to counterbalance the front muscles, right?
Yep. Yeah, man, you nailed it. I like to say that there's no bad exercise, generally speaking. An exercise could be bad for you, right? Doesn't mean that it's bad in general or for everyone, right?
Right.
And what's going to make that, a healthy movement for you or a bad movement for you is the state of your body prior to even doing the exercise. What your posture looks like, what your muscular balance looks like, what your mobility and flexibility look like.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, each person has to kind of assess themselves in a way, and your videos and my videos is kind of giving them some of that information for them to kind of know which direction to go and stuff like that. What are some common muscle imbalances that you focus on or that you see?
Yeah, so we just talked about one, the tight pecs. That's very, very common. And anytime, I always tell my clients this, you have to understand this. A muscular imbalance is a two-sided coin. And what that means is anytime there are muscles that are short and tight and tense and need to be released and stretched, there are always corresponding muscles to those muscles that are weak and need to be strengthened. And it's because of this, this extra layer of complexity adds complexity to the way that you have to address your body, because it's not just as simple as massaging the muscles that are tight, right? Because by doing that, you're only addressing one side of the coin, the tight muscles. You're not addressing the weak muscles, which typically are the antagonist muscles, the muscles that do the opposite, and sometimes the synergist muscles, some muscles that assist the muscles that are tight. You have to look at the muscles that have a relationship to the tight ones, and oftentimes be strengthening those. So common, muscle imbalances that I see all the time: tight pecs, weak external rotators of the shoulder, and weak scapular retractors, which are the muscles that sit in between the shoulder blades and basically pinch them together. Middle traps, lower traps, rhomboids. All of those muscles need to be strengthened typically when the pecs are short and tight. Another one we commonly see is, overactivity in the muscles behind the neck and on the side of the neck here, called the sternocleidomastoid. When these muscles shorten up, you get forward head posture. Those need to be stretched and released. And the deep cervical flexors, which are in the front of your neck, adjacent to your Adam's apple, those need to be strengthened. Another one that's super common is overactive and tight hip flexor muscles. And that's one of the ones that, kind of has a direct causation, or the causation of it is directly related to sitting. But, so hip flexor stretching, very common. I'm sure you've showed people how to do that on your channel. But again, we don't want to just be stretching the tight muscles and releasing them. We got to be strengthening the antagonist muscles. And when the hip flexors are tight, you can almost guarantee yourself that your glutes are going to be weak and they need to be strengthened. So that's another really common one: overactive hip flexors, underactive glutes. And then we also talked about the forward head posture and the pecs. Those are some of the most common, muscle imbalances and regions that we see. But again, like you were saying, everybody's different. It really depends on your breathing patterns, your own level of stress, the movement patterns that you make on a daily basis, what you do for work, the positions that you sleep in. There's a lot of different factors that can create a unique mix of muscle imbalances that you as an individual might be dealing with. And aside from having awareness of these things that we see commonly in the general population, it's important to get assessed by a professional and figure out where you have unique muscle imbalances that are specific to you, and postural misalignments, mobility issues, things like that. And it's important that you take an individualized, tailored approach to addressing your own body, especially if it's not where you want it to be. You're uncomfortable all the time. You have pain and things like that.
Yeah. And I think those are all awesome things. And definitely you and I, we talk a lot about those muscle imbalances, and especially, glute strengthening and stuff like that. And I think sometimes what happens, what I see, a lot of people are sometimes too focused on wanting to strengthen a muscle like glutes, but they want to do it with a lot of weight, or they want to do like heavy weights for the glutes. And I mean, you can tell me what you think about it. I mean, from my understanding, from a neuromuscular control, you don't actually need a lot of weight, especially in the beginning. What you want to do instead is just get that mind-muscle connection to the glute by doing some simple rehab type of exercises. Like we recommend bridges, single leg bridges, stuff like that, before even going into something like a deadlift or barbell squat. I think sometimes people just want to do heavy weights really quickly, or they think the heavy weight is the way to only strengthen the glutes or to do corrective exercises. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. You need to do activations first, especially if your glutes are really weak, any muscle really, so that you can develop that mind-muscle connection, so that you can have control over that muscle via the nervous system to actually get it to turn on and contract, and subsequently get stronger. So if you're dealing with serious glute weakness and poor activation, you have a poor mind-muscle connection, doing like barbell hip thrusters with weights, that's too much load to start with. You don't really need any load. I work with my clients as well, Leon.
I think we've frozen a little. Sorry, we just froze. Okay, now we're back. We're back. We just frozen.
So when I work with my clients, Leon, we'll do glute activation for sometimes weeks before we progress into doing more, similar movements that involve hip extension with like a weight load, like barbell hip thrusters. We got to make sure that the mind muscle connection is there and people are actually able to squeeze and contract their glutes before we start loading up that movement with weights. Another thing that I really see quite commonly with regards to the glutes, and I don't really see a lot of people talking about this online, Leon, is something called synergistic dominance of the hamstrings. So the glutes, super important postural muscles that most people don't think about. They also stabilize the low back, the hips, and the knees. So pretty much all of us need to work on glute strength. And something that happens commonly, especially in endurance athletes, is the hamstring muscles become dominant over the glutes with regards to hip extension, which is when your leg is going back behind you, right? So anytime you're standing up out of a chair, you're extending your hip. When you come out of the bottom of a squat all the way up, you're extending your hip. When you're walking and your leg's going behind you, you're extending your hip. And the prime mover, the muscle that's supposed to be doing the majority of the work in all of these motions involving the hip, which are all the same, hip extension, is the gluteus maximus. The hamstrings are synergist muscles to the gluteus maximus with regards to hip extension, meaning that they're supposed to assist the hamstring or the glutes to extend the hip. They're not supposed to do all the work for the glutes. But that is oftentimes the case with people, especially people that have poor glute activation. Their hamstring, something's extending their hip all the time when they're walking around. And if it's not their glutes, it's their hamstrings. So the very muscles that are supposed to be synergizing with the glutes are overpowering the glutes. And this becomes a vicious cycle that just keeps compounding on itself and getting worse over time. Because like I said, you're making these, you're extending your hip every day, just during everyday, movement, just walking around. And if it's the wrong muscles that are extending the hip, in this case, we're talking about the hamstrings, then they are being trained, they're being worked, and subsequently they're going to get stronger. The stronger they get, the more dominant over the glutes they become, and then the lazier the glutes get, and then the more the glutes will shrink and atrophy as they become more reliant on the hamstrings. And then as they become more reliant on the hamstrings, that gives the hamstrings even more reason to pick up, the slack and start working even harder. And this whole thing in this way just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, right? And eventually your low back, hips, and knees start to give you issues because your glutes have atrophied so much and now they can't stabilize those areas. So that's another reason why it's really important to work on that activation of the glutes. Because if you have really bad synergistic dominance of the hamstrings, and then somebody tells you, oh yeah, you have weak glutes, you need to go do barbell hip thrusters. And then you just get underneath that barbell and you start thrusting away and you're feeling your hamstrings work the whole time. You're again adding strength to this function and making that issue worse because effectively you're training the hamstrings. You're trying to train the glutes, but you're training the hamstrings instead, right? And again, that comes down to you and your unique muscular balance. Other people that have good glute activation, they can do that same exercise with the same objective form that you're doing it. For them, it's going to strengthen their glutes. For you, it's going to strengthen your hamstrings and in a roundabout way contribute to weakness in the glutes via kind of the pathway that I just talked about here. So that's like another thing that I see all the time with people, especially endurance athletes, that's kind of keeping their glutes shut off. And it's more kind of a rationale and a reason why starting with activation is important before you start moving into loaded movements.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing you just mentioned there. And this is me and Dr. Oliver. We've done a video actually on our channel, the glute bridge, and one of the things that he was talking about, Dr. Oliver talks about the same thing that you're talking about is, especially on the glute bridge, it's not only hamstrings can become overactive, but even people will use their quads. So they'll shoot up their hips, their legs up. And all they're feeling is their quads, which is the front of the thigh muscle. And they're not activating their glutes at all. And so his whole thing is to squeeze the glutes even before coming up. So it's like you try to squeeze the glutes and then you come up very little is his method. And I kind of like that because sometimes when you come up too much on the glute bridge, then the quads become involved too much. Yeah. And really, like you said, you want to feel your glutes activating. Yeah. So super important to get the, I think, and what's interesting is about all these exercises, like it seems kind of simple. And, I work out, I'm sure you work out too. It's where do you feel it, right? Like you should feel it. And it's kind of like, I had days when I would do barbell squat and then next day, all I felt, if I felt too much hamstring, I was like, okay, I did not do good glute activation like the day before. I didn't warm up well and all that kind of stuff. And the days when I feel my glutes the next day and my hamstring, at least together, then I feel, okay, it's good. I got hip extension muscles working. But if I only feel one of them, that means there's something going on in my nervous system that's not activating the right muscle, like you said, and I need to go back to the drawing board. So it's like, sometimes if I have that happen, I'll just go back to doing just like simple warm-ups that activate my glute or the right muscle. Yeah, I think it's so important that people do that because you could go years down the road of activating the wrong muscle and then get all those muscle imbalances and not even know it,
Yes. So, yeah, I really like what you said. It's not so much so about the exercise, but where you're feeling it. Because where you're feeling it is likely the fibers that are contracting. And obviously there's a big problem if you're doing an exercise like hip thrusters or hip bridges and you're trying to activate your glutes, but you're feeling your hamstrings work instead, because that is the indication that you're really training those, right? And the muscles that you're not feeling are not activating. They're not turning on. They're not contracting. So they're not going to benefit from the exercise, right? It's going to be the muscles that you do feel where you are feeling it. When you have that kind of awareness of your body, those are the muscles that are subsequently being worked and broken down and will be stimulated through this process to get stronger. So there is more nuance here, right? It's not just about your form when you're doing an exercise. It's about the exercise selection itself and where you're feeling it when you're actually doing that movement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about postural exercise and corrective exercises for posture. Like we both talk a lot about those on our channels and in our courses. One of the most common question I have people asking me, and maybe you have that too, is how often they should do postural exercises or corrective exercises. Like how often? Like what do you say to that?
Well, typically when I work with coaching clients, for example, I'll tell them at least 3 to 4 times a week. So a lot of frequency. And my rationale here is this: muscle imbalances, postural misalignments, these things don't form overnight, and they don't go away overnight either. Sometimes they form over many years, sometimes decades. And it's silly to think that they'll go away, in an extremely fast manner, considering how long it took to develop them in the first place. So once we have identified what muscle imbalances somebody is, working with and working to correct, and what postural misalignments and mobility issues, and we're very clear of that, once I get them, my own clients started on a plan, I tell them 3 to 4 times a week because, like I just said, the muscle imbalances, the postural misalignments, they didn't form overnight and they don't go away overnight. They form over many, many years, over a long period of time, with a lot of repetition and frequency. So what I try to do with my clients is condense time down onto itself by repeating what I know my client needs to do in a narrow period of time with a lot of frequency, packed into that small time window, 1 to 3 months. That way they're working on their own imbalances with a laser-like focus and really making a lot of progress on doing them. Obviously it's different for everybody. And, once you start moving past activation and stuff like that, and some self-myofascial release, you need to give your body a little bit more time to repair the muscle tissue that you're breaking down with your strength training, so that you wouldn't be able to do it back to back like that. But yeah, in general, most people should be doing, I believe, postural corrective exercises about 3 to 4 times a week. That's how much I do them. I simply just integrate my corrective exercises into my strength training workouts. Okay. You mentioned earlier thoracic mobility issues. That's very common, right? Pretty much everybody has that. Every single time before I strength train, I do thoracic mobilizations. I also do self-myofascial release on my pecs, and I do a little bit of activation for my upper back. Anytime before I train anything upper body, I do that. I also do lower body corrective exercises before my lower body days. Glute activations, open up my hip flexors, work on internal rotation of my hips, stuff like that. So I think part of why people are so concerned about how long will this take? How long do I have to do it? Is because they do their corrective exercises outside of their workouts, which is good to do for a period of time, especially if they're really, really imbalanced people. Then you want them to kind of do a reset where they're not adding strength to dysfunction. They're just doing corrective exercises. But after about like a month of that, it's important to get back and, doing a well-rounded strength training plan, because strength is protective of your joints and your body in and of itself, right? Your muscles insulate all your joints. So becoming weak is not good. And if you get stuck in the corrective exercise hole, which is what I call that, where you're striving for perfection, you stop working out altogether. You just start doing corrective exercises only to the exclusion of all other forms of exercise. And you do this for a long period of time, you're going to get weak. And being weak is a major predisposing factor to injury in and of itself. So we don't want to get weak. So what I oftentimes recommend, about a month or so of corrective exercise that is targeted for them and fully tailored for them. And then after that, continue with a lot of those core corrective exercises, but simply just integrate them into like a warm up or a cool down that you do before or after your balanced strength training workouts. That way, that kind of answers that question. Like, well, how long do I, will this take? How often should I be doing it? Well, you should be doing it kind of all the time on an ongoing basis, because whether people are going to like to hear this or not, once you have developed neuromuscular imbalances and postural misalignments, there is always this propensity that you're going to have to revert back to that, right? The ideal with doing corrective exercise is that you're totally going to eradicate all of your postural imbalances, your muscle imbalances, so on and so forth, and you're going to be perfect. That's oftentimes not the case. Oftentimes, when you first develop these things, now you're going to have the likelihood to develop them again in the future. So it's important to keep the things going on that gave you results integrated into your routine as a maintenance protocol so that you don't revert back to where you were before. So in this way, corrective exercise is kind of like an endless thing that you'll do for the rest of your life. And it doesn't have to be like this big time investment thing that requires a lot of sacrifice from you, right? And I think people's real concern when they ask you that question is coming from that. Like, how much do I have to sacrifice time, energy wise in order to, get from A to B? Well, 10 minutes a day, if you integrate it into your workout and it's something that you can easily do. So make it easy on yourself, and include it in part of a warm up or a cool down.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, I agree with you. I always say that, yeah, you're going to do it basically forever. Either if you're elderly and you can't really work out too much or whatever reasons, then you might only do corrective exercises, and that might be your workout, and that's okay. If you are able to, like you said, get back to some strength training, just integrate it together with your strength training.
Yeah.
You can do both. But I think the issue is that so many people just sit at their computers all day for 8 hours a day, and then they think that doing 3 or 4 times a week of corrective exercises is too much, but it's not. I think even in the beginning, they may want to do it even once a day or even twice a day in the very beginning.
It depends on what we're talking about too, corrective exercise can involve different modalities, joint mobilizations, strengthening, self-myofascial release, stretching. Generally speaking, self-massage and stretching, that kind of stuff can be done with a high volume. You can do that every day, right?
Yeah.
Strengthening a muscle, that requires usually a little bit more recovery time in between your sessions. But somebody that people can get started with, like foam rolling, for example, and do that every day, really.
Yeah, exactly.
The key is too, knowing what you need to be foam rolling, right, and having that awareness of what you're dealing with individually, right? Because you don't want to be foam rolling a muscle that is long and taut and weak, because when you do that, you weaken it more. Foam rolling a muscle basically turns down a neurological drive going into the muscle, telling it to try and contract. And when you foam roll something or when you stretch it, you inhibit it. You shut down that neurological drive and you weaken it. And that could be used strategically on your tight overactive muscles that need that. But if you start rolling muscles that you're already weakened, then you can oftentimes make those areas worse. And one area that people do this all the time in is the upper back, those scapular retractors. Lots of people have knots in that area, right? Oh, it's really uncomfortable here. So what do? They get a lacrosse ball, they put it against the wall, they rub against it, they have their partner massage in there really deeply. Those muscles 9 times out of 10 need to be strengthened. They're bothering you because they're weak, and weak muscles are most easily strained. What you need to do there is strengthen them. Rolling them and massaging those muscles, can actually compound this issue. It might make it feel a little bit better temporarily, but it's going to weaken those muscles even more. And that's going to have more long-term ill effects than it will benefits for you. So when we say things like, yeah, you can foam roll every day, it still has to come from a place where you're knowing why you're rolling that muscle and you're specific with your intention, right? If you know your hip flexors are tight and short, then yes, foam roll them. But you don't want to just be foam rolling or stretching the whole body. I'm not a big fan of that. Right? People ask me, like, can you just show me a full body mobility sequence or upload that to YouTube? It's like, no, I'm not going to do that, because some of your joints might be hypermobile already and need to be stabilized and not have more mobility added to them. So I am a huge fan of this, what we've kind of been talking about, this individualized approach. And I really believe that each corrective exercise is kind of like a prescription. You and I are not doctors, and I never would claim to be one, but corrective exercise has a very specific focus, right? You should only be doing corrective exercises that you need, frankly, based on some sort of assessment, whether you're going to assess yourself or have somebody else assess you. it's important to know why and how you're addressing the things in your own body.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's move on a little bit to stress, because you touched on that a little bit. Stress is a big factor for people these days, and can also cause poor posture. There's also research says that people with stress, anxiety, have more back pain as well, low back pain and stuff like that. What are some of the ways you think people can reduce their stress?
Yeah, so huge can of worms there with that question, Leon. There's, we could talk about this in a whole episode that's just focused on this. But some of the hardest hitting things, the things that are going to give listeners the biggest edge or advantage in addressing their stress, I believe, are these. One is doing breath work. And you can combine that like with meditation as well. But a lot of people that have a lot of stress, they're mouth breathers, right? When you're in a state of stress, you breathe through your mouth typically. Breathing through your nose can actually help to activate that feed or breathe branch of the nervous system that calms your body down. So simply put, one very powerful tool that people can do is meditate while doing deep breathing into their belly, diaphragmatic breathing, using their nose the whole time. Okay. Very powerful thing. It's the simple things that are powerful, right? This integrated into somebody's like daily practice for 10 to 15 minutes will have a huge impact on stress. So that's one. The other thing is, I believe stress comes from one of two places: not doing the things that you know you should be doing, A, and B, worrying about things that you can't do anything about, right? So you have to keep that in mind too. A lot of us create extra stress in our lives, which affect our health, just based off of the actions that we have and how we see and perceive the world and how we worry about certain things. The things that you know you need to do for your family, for your business, for your personal health, don't put those off. When you push those off and you delay those and you procrastinate those on those things, that creates stress, right? So do the things that you know you need to do. Harbor discipline in your body and do those things. And stop worrying about all of these things that are outside of your circle of control and your circle of influence, because by their very nature, you can't do anything about these anyway. World events, things like that. There's a lot of things nowadays that a lot of people are worrying about that are totally outside of their circle of control and influence. There's not a single thing that they can do about it. So why are they wasting their life force and their energy thinking about these things and worrying about them and creating all this chaos within themselves? Because at the end of the day, they can't even do anything about it anyway. It's mindless, right? And we don't necessarily think about things this way, but it's important that we do. And it's important that we only, give our concern and our attention to the things that we actually can do something about. And then we have to make sure that we're actually doing things about those things. We're taking action, right? Action beats anxiety. So that's very important too. Doing the things that you know you should be doing and avoiding ruminating on the things that you have no control over in the first place. Easier said than done. But if you can actually get to a place where you're able to live by that, you're going to be a lot happier and a lot less stressed. I promise you that. So first thing, deep breathing through the nose into the belly while meditating. Second thing, focus on those things that you can do something about and actually make sure you're taking action in alignment with those things, and stop worrying about the things that you can't control. The third kind of category, I guess, that I'll talk about right now, and again, this is a total big, can of worms. But the third category is using certain herbs and medicinal mushrooms known as adaptogens, which are a category of herbs and nutraceuticals and herbalism that are known to help support the body's, response to stress, right? A lot of these can actually lower cortisol, which is your primary stress hormone in your body. When you're stressed out, cortisol is high. A lot of these can mitigate the release of that and lower it and just make you a lot more calm. Some of the biggest, most powerful ones that I've encountered over the years is ashwagandha, which is a plant used in Ayurveda, and reishi mushroom. which is a mushroom that's been used in traditional Chinese medicine for hundreds of years as well. Both of these have powerful and synergistic effects on your body's experience with stress, and they can calm you down a lot. And there's a lot of other different adaptogens too, but and I've taken all of them, and I've experienced with all of them, and I've grown all of them. All right, I've grown rhodiola, reishi mushroom.
I haven't.
Yes, so
That's fascinating.
I'm not just like taking these things. I've taken them, I've studied them, and I've literally grown them over the years. And there are many that are adapted, have that adaptogen status, but the ones that I personally have found that makes the biggest difference for me, something that's palpable that I can absolutely feel, ashwagandha and reishi mushroom. So yeah, those are three little tools that are heavy hitting that really can, if people look into these things, research them, ask their doctor about them, they can make a big difference. And I guess the last thing I kind of want to throw in there too is an app called Brain FM, which is brain.fm. This is an app that uses sound frequencies all based in neuroscience that help change your brainwave states. And there's different tracks on there for different purposes. There's a meditation one, there's relax, there's focus, and they all work amazingly well. It's pretty crazy how powerful these are. Have you ever used them, Brain FM?
No, I have used Headspace before, which has certain meditations for specific reasons, and it has like some kind of sleep casts where you can go to sleep to a certain cast. But Brain FM, you're saying these are sounds?
Yeah. So this, just to be frank, just kicks Headspace's butt. I've used that as well. When I did use that, it was a couple of years ago though. But from what I recall, that was like a guided meditation app, right?
Yeah.
In Brain FM, these are not guided meditations. These are literally just sound waves, right? It's music that you listen to. And it's kind of like binaural beats or isochronic tones. If you ever use that, it's brainwave entrainment, meaning that your brain waves will synchronize with the frequencies coming in from the headphones, right? And these frequencies coming in from the headphones are designed to elicit certain psychological states. Like I said, it's all based in neuroscience. But the reason why I bring that up is because the de-stress tracks on there, the relaxation tracks, they're amazing. You'll literally feel your body like totally calm down and relax when you put these on after about 5 minutes that's how long it takes for the neurological effect to kind of kick in. Also, the focus tracks are amazing too. Whenever I have to sit down and write a bunch or plan a new YouTube video or something like that, I'll use that app and my output will be twice as much, with it on versus when I'm not wearing them. So it's a very powerful app and one that I've been using for like 6 years. I'm a big fan of it. And that could be another one, kind of like a bonus to throw into that list.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff there. Yeah, that's awesome. So you use the Brain FM in your sauna? Blake has a sauna in his house.
Yeah, I do sometimes. If I'm like really stressed out, like, I don't know, a bunch of bad things happen in work back to back, and I'm like, sometimes things like that happen. Yeah, I'll get in there and I'll put that on in the speaker system in there. And then within 10 minutes, I'll be feeling a lot different.
I guess that's the last thing. Another last stress thing is sauna, right? Sauna can be really good for you. Lots of benefits.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. You don't even need to like tell people that. That's something best learned experientially, right?
Yeah.
Like just go into a sauna. If you're stressed out prior to getting into sauna, you can like literally like feel the like stress like melt off of your body when you're sitting in the sauna, right? And so many health benefits to that too. But yeah, that's a huge one for stress relief, which is why I have one in my house here. So
yeah, so guys, everybody's listening, get a sauna in your house and you'll be all set. I have one in my gym, so that's where I go.
Yeah, man.
All right, so we're coming up on an hour. Lots of great info. There's two other things that we can briefly touch on that, I frankly don't know much about, but you told me about them, so we could quickly, you can quickly tell our audience what they are, and they can, they can look it up for more information. One of the biohacking modalities that you mentioned was using PEMF, which is pulse electric magnetic field, right?
Yep.
Can you tell our audience what that is and why they should care about it?
Yeah. The other thing that you and I talked about was blood flow restriction training.
Yep.
And to be frank with you, Leon, I know more about that than I do the science of PEMF, pulse electromagnetic field therapy.
Okay, we could talk about the blood flow restriction.
Yeah. PEMF, I am a big fan of it, but if you want to talk to an expert about that, I could have put you in contact with my friend, Dr. Lisa. She has these at her clinic, and she uses these for a variety of different orthopedic issues, rotator cuff problems, spinal issues, things like that. I do believe it's very efficacious, but I'm not the greatest person to tell you about the science and the benefits of it and the applications of it. I can tell you about blood flow restriction training, though.
Yeah, let's talk about blood flow restriction. Yeah, no problem.
So blood flow restriction training. This kind of sounds crazy to most people when they hear that term. Like, what the heck? You're restricting blood flow? What does this mean? Like, it sounds dangerous. Well, it's actually been used for decades now, and specifically, it's used with injured athletes a lot. What it involves is you putting bands in 2 points, either right here, where you're, right above your bicep and your tricep, or in your like groin on your thighs. Right? Those are the only 2 places that you can do this. You basically put really tight bands on there, and there's a variety of different bands that you can get for this. Some are very like specific, and they're filled up to a very specific pressure using like a blood pressure cuff. Right? That's how the science-based people will do it. They'll standardize the pressure on each one and make sure that it's very exact. But the whole idea here is that you work out your limbs while you have these straps on, and they're pretty tight. And what they'll allow is blood to flow into the muscle, but it will restrict the vein return of that blood out of the muscle back into your, the center of your body. So every single rep that you do with these bands on kind of engorges the muscle a little bit more and more with blood. And it can be really unpleasant, right? It feels like your muscles are working extremely hard, and they are. The perceived exertion goes through the roof. You're exerting yourself really hard, but you're lifting a very small amount of weight, usually 10% of your 1 rep max, which is why this is so cool. And it's why it's also used for injured athletes, because they can basically do workouts with just resistance bands without even lifting weights and get serious benefit from doing it. What is the benefit? Well, it's going to boost myogenic stem cells and growth hormone by a very high amount. All right. What does that mean? Well, myogenic stem cells are stem cells that can turn into muscle. Myo means muscle. Myogenic means turns into muscle, right? So this training modality boosts this myogenic stem cells and growth hormone in your body. The more growth hormone you have, the more cellular regeneration you're going to have all over the place, right? Your skin's going to regenerate faster. You're going to recover faster from workouts. Anything that causes, anything that is associated with like cellular renewal in your body is going to become upregulated. All right. Why did I tell you about this? And why do you think I think your listeners would like to learn more about this? Well, if you're dealing with anything, an achy shoulder, an achy back, you're doing corrective exercises for it already. By throwing some of these blood flow restriction straps on your extremities and working those, you're going to get a full body boost of, these stem cells and growth hormone, which are going to just basically assist the cellular regeneration of whatever you need to have improved, right? So what I like to do is release these things in the body, the growth hormone and the myogenic stem cells, via the blood flow restriction training. And then I presume that these are in my general, circulation, these hormones and stem cells. And then what I'll do is I'll guide them into the tissues in my body that I specifically want them to go into, like my shoulder, for example, my left shoulder, by using like hot and cold on that area, like a hot and cold pack after I do the blood flow restriction training. Or I can use lasers on there, or maybe PMF to drive, those compounds that are now released into my blood specifically into the tissues that I want them to go into. And in this way, there's so much application for this, right? For injured people, for people, not even just injured people, people that are elderly and want to maintain their muscle mass and don't want to have to lift heavy weights and possibly injure themselves in order to get there. It's very, very cool with regards to its application with these kind of things. There's a lot of science on it out there. And I would probably recommend you do this with a qualified, somebody that can teach you how to do it specifically. It is contraindicated, meaning you shouldn't do it if you're in, certain populations of people. If you've had strokes or serious cardiovascular issues, you don't want to do it. And in general, you should always be, consulting with a professional, especially if you're elderly or you have some sort of illness, before you do something like this. But assuming that you have proper professional guidance, it's a really amazing tool that can be used in synergy with corrective exercise to help the body regenerate faster and help maintain muscle too. So it's a big thing. I've been using it I can't say ever since I discovered it, because in 2008, when I was like 18, I saw a lot of bodybuilders doing this, and I thought that I didn't understand why they were doing it. I thought they just were trying to look cool because it makes your veins pop out and things like that when you put these on really tight. So I was like, these guys are just trying to look cool. I found out many years later in 2015, I really discovered all the science behind it. And that's when my mind was blown. I was like, wow, the bodybuilders were onto something here. This is a powerful modality and something that is really useful.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned there is most applicable to our audience is elderly people who can't necessarily lift heavy weights can use this, and people who are in the rehab stage, post-injury stage, could benefit from doing this. So that makes sense. Yeah.
Yep. And in the science, those are the two populations that it's used most commonly on, from what I recall. Elderly people that are somewhat sedentary and injured athletes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Nice. Yep. Yeah. Makes sense. Cool. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah. I think we covered a lot of good stuff. So yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Lots of good information. And why don't you just to finish this off, just tell people where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel as well. It's Gorilla Zen Fitness. That's my website too, and also my Instagram. I spell gorilla like gorilla fighter, so it's GUERRILLAZEN. Gorilla Zen. There's 2 R's and 2 L's. But yeah, you can see me on YouTube. I'm uploading there right now once a week. And I'm on Instagram too. And my website has a lot of resources on this stuff too. And if you want to find out more about these tools, the BFR bands, other biohacking stuff that we talked about today, ashwagandha, reishi, and stuff like that, that's all on my website as well, which is just gorillazen.com, GUERRILLAZEN.com. Awesome. That's where I can be reached, man.
Yeah, we'll have the links down below in the description of this video as well. People can check it out. Yeah, thank you, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good, Leon. Appreciate you.